With no further ado, we would like to begin. Starting from now, we are going to conduct the session 3, Carbon Neutral and Cities. Once again, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Kurahashi. I am working as coordinator and the moderator for each session at this forum. Nice to meet you all. First and foremost, we would like to ask Professor Harashina, the president of Chiba University of Commerce and president of the Japan Association for Real Estate Sciences, to provide us with the talk. The title is Carbon Neutral and Carbon Neutral. Please make sure to turn on your microphone and choose the Japanese channel and speak into it. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. My name is Harashina. I belong to the Chiba University of Commerce. I would like to give you the talk in regards to the city and carbon neutrality. So we must reduce the carbon emission, and because we're talking about the neutrality, we have to increase absorption. So from the such perspective, I would like to give you the talk. Well, we would like to focus on to the particular area of the Jingu and the Gaian, which is attracting lots of attention. When we think about the city, I think this is a symbolic example. Therefore, with no further ado, please allow me to project my screen. By the way, the background that you see here, it shows the rooftop solar of my university, and I will refer to that point later on as well. Thank you very much. The title is Carbon Neutrality and the City. Well, at the Japan Association for Real Estate Sciences, I serve as the president as well, so I would like to talk from that perspective as well. My specialty is environmental plan and the deployment of the policy, the research and social engineering is the key here. And so the public concerns as to how we respond to the public concerns, the participation and the consensus voting is quite important. And that was talked about at the previous session. Well, without the system, for example, what we heard about the premium, even if the yield is less, well, the people should be willing and to make investment, not much in case of the Japan, but we actually are at our university doing this as well. So anyhow, what's important here is the impact assessment, and same goes for the loan. Well, impact assessment would be required when you make the investment. What we talked about the value, the assessment again in regards to the environment. Well, here is the environmental assessment. I have been working on the research for this quite long at the Broadcast University for about 15 to 16 years. I have been working on the lecture, and this is the textbook that I have been using. And there's one thing that I have been mentioning during my lecture. Well, the Japanese assessment has been isolated with the decision making, and an assessment is supposed to be able to support the consensus building, but that is not functioning in Japan. Well, that we have to respond to the public concerns. That really is the key. What you see here is something that I have introduced in my lecture at the Broadcast University. Well, actually, it was originally a video. Well, I rode on a helicopter and I took photos. Well, I took these photos at 20 and 30 years ago. Well, for the latter half of the series of the lecture, so I took picture for Tokyo and New York. Actually, Tokyo was quite dense, but in the last 20 years, actually, Tokyo has become more dense. It is now very dense, even compared to New York. That's the reality of Tokyo. But what about 10 kilometers from the center? New York has a green. But in Tokyo, or even at the place 10 kilometers away from the city and center is really dense. It's much more dense nowadays. Therefore, the Tokyo actually is the city with the highest dense. Well, about 38 million people live in Tokyo, and there is no place like Tokyo in the globe. So that's the status I hope that you would recognize in the beginning. So about 20 or so years ago, well, the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport, and Tourism had decided to work on the study about the transfer of the urban function. I've had an opportunity to give a talk when I used to be young. And we talked about the Doshu-sei system or the system of the wide area administration. We felt that the decentralized system would be required because there is a risk in concentrating at all the city functions in Tokyo, especially because of the possibility of the earthquake directly hitting the Tokyo. So we talked about over-concentration of Tokyo. We believe that this is a very discussion that we need to talk about. And after the online discussion that we've had, the Fukushima Daiichi, the nuclear power plant, faced an incident with many people have not been able to return to the community. It actually was a huge violation of the human rights. And what is sustainable energy? Such was the discussion that had been held. So we've thought about it. What you see here is the green is the GHG emission is been decreasing. Actually, in between 2009 to 2012, because of the stoppage of the operation of the atomic the power plant, it had went up, but it has started to go down. Actually, back then, there was no operation of the atomic power plant, but still the GHG emission had went down every year. According to the latest information from about 3 years ago, which is the fixed the report value, according to the Ministry of Environment, the emission amount was 1.1 billion. Well, actually, for this year, according to the flash report, the emission amount actually stayed flat, even though there was a slight increase due to the COVID. Well, this is due to the promotion of the renewable, the energy saving and increase of the natural energy, meaning that we could clearly see that we can sustain and do things without the nuclear power plant. So energy self-sufficiency can enrich the regional community. Currently, we import the physical correction, the fossil energy, and it is currently increasing a bit due to the yen and depreciation. But if we'd be able to self-sustain the energy, then we would be able to make the economy much richer. For example, in Germany, they had reduced by about 50% with the energy effective policy. And they worked on the implementation of the thermal insulation of the buildings, which would help to promote the regional community. Japan is rich with renewable energy. According to Ministry of Environment, about 20, there is a double the potential of the renewable. The potential of the natural energy is double the amount which we are currently using. So we have lots of natural energy, so we have to combine them in the right way. If we would be able to have the right energy mix, it would work right. But of course, each community has different players. So the actions by all actors are required, and the university would not be able to get away from this. 2 years ago, UN has the Energy Month in the month of June, where the ministerial event would take place, and there was a side event. Well, we were told to give a keynote speech in order to introduce the example of Japan, where I talked under the theme of the energy revolution for universities. It says UN raised to zero. Not only the university, but corporations are part of it. And in Japan, what are we going to do? There are 1,200 universities in the world that are joining UN raised to zero, but only two from Japan. And University of Tokyo had followed us, but not other universities. Therefore, we felt that, you have to start from yourself. Therefore, we decided that we should get started with our activities in Japan. So at that same timing, 2 years ago, we had started the Renewable Energy University League of Japan, and I've had an opportunity to give a talk back then. So, and right now, the participating universities presidents, there are about 20 of them, and we are seeing the increase of the number. I really do hope that other universities would also join the league. What you see here, Well, our activities had been recognized and we received the Green Grown Awards 2030 Climate Action. The category had been established last year. We became the first winner. This is quite important. In the US, as universities like Stanford and Harvard or Oxford, there are many universities who are engaged in these activities and they have strong funding capacity. So they would purchase in order to achieve 100%. Of course, that's part of our activity, but what's important is to work on saving of the energy and to generate the energy. If we cannot fulfill, then we are going to purchase. So three pillars. This can be applied generally. Even if you do not have enough the funding, you'll be able to make the effort. So just like that, it's important that each party would pay the effort. Same thing can be said for the city creation as well too. So let's move on to the topic about the carbon neutrality of the cities. First and foremost, the city activity is the source of the CO2. So for that purpose, we talk about something called compact city. But once you create the skyscrapers, then and the carbon would emit it. So it's quite important. Another important aspect is absorption. The park serves as a source of the absorption or sink. That's quite important. It's important that we increase the parks and the garden cities or the compact city. With the network of the compact city, we should formulate the network throughout the country. And what's important here is that we work on the urban development based on the appropriate land utilization. With that responsibility of the responsibility of person who is in charge of the urban development development is going to be required. Well, you would not be able to develop the city by decreasing the parks. So nature positive is important. You have to maintain the existing park. And now we are seeing lots of vacancy in the households, and we should try to eliminate them and create greens. As for Japan, about 2/3 of the territory is filled with the forest, which is beneficial for the carbon neutrality. But at this moment, well, again, compared to the emission volume, the absorption amount is only about 10%. Well, we have been emitting about 1.17 billion ton, whereas the absorption is only 0.12 billion tons. So what's important is that we increase the amount of the absorption. So we have to reduce the CO2 emission at the maximum level while increasing the forest. That's the approach. So we should increase the parks at the cities. Those are the basics. A, B, C. So let's move on to this topic. Scrap and build-based urban development is obsolete, as you are aware of. Well, the same goes for all the advanced countries. So the CO2 emitted from the new buildings, not only that, but operation carbon is quite important. We are checking that as a part of the assessment taking place in Japan, but that's not sufficient. From now, we have to take a look at the embodied carbon, which includes the whole life cycle, including the sourcing of the materials and also the construction at the period. So we should so embodied carbon, including upfront carbon, all these are going to be especially important, meaning we have to take a look at this from the standpoint of the supply chain. And there is something called life cycle assessment. Whole life carbon would have to be checked. That enables us to check the sustainability. But on the other hand, starting from around 2000, Tokyo has seen in the last 20 years or so abnormal high use or highly concentrated urban development. So under the name of urban renaissance, there has been the massive scrap and build, and the deregulation took place that went beyond existing urban planning regulation. I'm a bit worried. In real estate world, well, we will. What will we believe that in rebuilding the city, the history and the culture of the city is quite important. And at the same time, we need to increase the park. But on the other hand, the parks increase in Tokyo is quite rare. We are talking about the trees that have been grown inside the city. They are totally different from the trees available elsewhere because they have the culture of that background as well too. So our association for the real estate is checking that as well, and based on that data, Dr. Koji had came up with a diagram. Well, well, are the buildings at the time of the construction had emitted 1.04 to 1.27 tons of the CO2 per square meters. So lots of CO2 would be emitted with the redevelopment of the city. The same goes with the Tonanamo area, and this much is emitted for the redevelopment of the Jingu area. Well, so if we want to make it into net zero, for the Tokyo, we need the forest which with the size of more than 1.14 times the size of Tokyo. Now let's move on to the specific example. I would like to introduce you to Meiji Jingu.
This is a photo when it was very green, so it's like the oasis within the city. And this is last month, another picture from November. You see the ginkgo trees, very yellow. It's going to become even more beautiful. And this is November, and this is October, a little before that. And this is in front of the Kaigakan. And Aoyamadori Road is here. It is 4 rows of ginkgos. It's very rare. It looks beautiful. And on the right-hand side, there's a large building. That is Itochu building, 90 meters in height. And actually, the height regulation for that road was 60 meters. However, that building is 90 meters high. It was exception. Whether or not this was good or not, we question that. So, Jingu Gaien belongs to Meiji Jingu, Meiji Shrine, but it used to be national land, state-owned land. The Meiji Jingu, the Meiji Shrine became a religious organization and mixed. So they applied to mix that they would manage the land as a public space. So initially, about 100 years ago, this was built from all of the donations of money, labor, and wood. So it's the first of its kind in the world where no public money was used to establish this park, and ICOMOS was also very surprised. So there's historical significance, and it is a public space with 100 years of history, so it is a valuable space. And here, this is the development plan underway for this area. IAIA, the International Association for Impact Assessment. So this is the organizations to carry out environmental impact assessment. And this is the material that we use when we explain this. Everyone was surprised. In this park, are there going to be so many buildings built? And there will be high rise as well. This is unthinkable from the Western perspective. It's like creating a high rise right in the middle of Central Park. And these parks within Central Tokyo is extremely valuable. And also, it is in history books. There are trees that is more than 100 years old, and there are so many ginkgo trees as well, but there's a redevelopment plan underway. So there's assessment carried out from for this redevelopment plan, and there is SDGs check. There are so many things missing. So, for example, the large city oasis and heat island, and also concerning the construction waste, no measures under place. HGHG gas, the operational carbon. It doesn't say embodied carbon, but embodied carbon is extremely important, but that is not included. And also historical cultural value, and ICOMOS is focusing on this as one of the heritage areas. And also there's going to be increase in daytime population, so there will be stranded people who will not be able to go home in the time of disaster. There are many, many risks and many issues. Not only that, so all of these items, so many items have not been checked. It seems that there is not sufficient information, and there was also false information, and that was mentioned. But IAIA, I'm responsible for the Japan chapter, and we came up with a complaint. So there's deficiency in the evaluation framework, and also there's wrong data, correct analysis is done. So there was lack of science, and also the assessment per se was an issue. And Japan e-commerce experts have said that there should be a public discussion and the construction should be stopped. But there was no response. So e-commerce headquarters in September issued heritage alert to a request for the review of the redevelopment plan and also to carry out the assessment once again to come up with a plan that is in line with SDGs. So there was not sufficient information disclosure and significant response was not provided. So the content of the real estate development, the way it is done, that is an issue. And this is just a temporary issue to link it with high-use redevelopment. And also, the volume transfer method can only be used. What is going to happen in 100 years? And also the maintenance, for the sustainable maintenance, that is not, the cost in itself is not an issue. It can be about 100 billion yen per year or so. And there can be public support for the parks. And there are other fundamental issues as well. The extra space in this park is actually supposed to be used for sports facilities, but can it be used for offices or for commercial facilities? And also, it's a scenic zone, but that will be distracted. The history is going to be distracted. So it is not in line. The plan is not in line with SDGs. And this is the heritage alert that was issued in September. As I mentioned earlier, this was the content of the alert. And this shows here that this has been in place since Edo era, 100%. And there's 400-year history that remains. As you can see, so many greenery. Initially, it used to be a mansion, and after the major revolution, it became to be owned by the imperial palace. However, Jingu Gaian, as you see, was initially created by donations with no public support. So this is the core. Anyone can enter. Other places people can't enter. So this public space needs to be protected. It's extremely important. Meiji Jingu, when it was the Jingu Gaien, initially there was a lot of greenery. And Jingu baseball stadium is on the right-hand side, and the Kaigakan is on. In the middle, there's the ginkgo trees. But now this is how it looks. The greenery has diminished. So there's been other facilities built, like another baseball stadium, and there are various additional buildings built, meaning that the greenery has diminished. And this is the photo that I showed you earlier on, close to Aoyamadori, a very beautiful landscape. But if you look at it from the other perspective, you see ginkgo, you see cars, so there's exhaust gas issue. And this is becoming a big issue as well. Please look at this photograph. This is the west side of the ginkgo tree. One is also rotting because of the extreme global warming. And the conditions are very poor because if you look at Aoyamadori Road on the east side, on the right-hand side, there are more trees. At the west side, because there are buildings, the trees are not protected. There are many buildings, small and large, meaning that the water doesn't circulate properly because of these buildings. So even under those conditions, these trees subsisted. However, because of the global warming, this is how it looks. And there should be redevelopment in order to protect these trees. This is the image for the plan, the redevelopment plan. So the stadium is going to be right near the ginkgo trees, which will destruct the trees. And the rugby stadium on the right-hand side in the corner, there's a 100-year forest as well. And they're going to destruct that. And baseball stadium by the ginkgo. And there's housing as well. But that area for the collective housing is going to be reduced by about 1/2. And there's going to be a membership tennis court, meaning that the publicly available space will go down to about 1/3 of the current area, and there will be 3 high-rise buildings planned. So this is the current situation. The height, I mentioned the high-rise buildings. The American architects drew this diagram for me to show the height. So with these super high-rise buildings, the landscape is going to be constructed. The total building I mentioned was 90 meters, but this building here is 190 meters, twice the Itochu building. And this is the stadium. It's going to be relocated. And so here, it's going to be very scary here. The ginkgo trees will remain. However, they won't remain. They won't live. And the forest that was here will be demolished as well because of this building. Rugby stadium with a roof, is that necessary? And there will be a lot of wind as well. So there are many, many problems. So Japan e-commerce has been proposing this. So to utilize this. So this is the 100-year forest, which we want to enlarge that. There's a lot of greenery. We will need to increase that. And the rugby stadium and the baseball stadium to renovate on-site without relocation. And right-hand side, this was when it was initially built. So our plan is very similar to this one. And it's carbon neutral and nature positive. So the existing trees will be protected, will be conserved, carbon neutral, nature positive. So the greenery that is already there should be protected and increased. So the buildings should be minimized and new greenery should be created. So this is our proposal. So urban carbon neutral. The urban activities generate CO2, so we need to minimize that. And the greenery will be absorbing CO2, so we need to increase that. Compact city, garden city network in DX society. So a lot of the work can be done at home. So people can do things within walking distance. And at that time, we don't need high-rise buildings, as the low-rise is fine. And appropriate land use should be done in order to carry out urban development, carbon neutral urban development, nature positive. So the existing greenery will be conserved, and the buildings will be organized so that greenery can be created. Scrap and build urban planning is outdated. Urban planning policy with strategy is required. And we need to be creative. Democratic procedures. So strategic environmental assessment. Strategic environmental assessment is required for the master plan for a land use project. So we need to look at the entire structure by listening to everyone and be consider people's concerns to develop. By including such processes, carbon neutral cities can be born. I think I'm out of time. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for your attention. Professor Harashina, thank you very much for your presentation.